Okay, so I think this is probably going to be a little bit better of a video for actually breaking down the double sniper setup. So Contenders this week saw double sniper on Route 66 both times it was played, and there was full holds both times double snipers played on defense. And there was two different setups for it, which is this basically makes it perfect. They had a dive tank setup from GGEA Esports, and they had a Orisa Diva setup for Toronto. Uh, So the way that they do it, the whole concept starts. Their starting position is basically the same. Diva plays over by the cave. Orisa, Hanzo, Widowmaker, main support play up there, and then Zen also plays up there to start. But GEA ran Sombra over the Zen. So the Sombra was just hacking those two packs primarily. Occasionally hacked that one. She didn't really hack enemy teammates. She just used EMP to do that, and was basically either farming EMP or hacking health packs all the time, acting as a support. So the reason both your sniper stack sight lines is to start right there. A lot of times there'll be a widow run on attack as well, and they'll go for like a jump shot up here or up here. And having that Winston bubble or that Orisa barrier there allows your widow to win that duel, and you don't get picked instantly. But once you have the spacing out and you know what their comp is, you'll see people, the defensive team, change their positioning a little bit based off of that comp, right? So if there is still that widow that you have to worry about, the Orisa will put the shield a little bit further forward, and the Widowmaker either play further forward or further back, depending on what their tanks are. If they don't have dive tanks, you basically stand right behind that Orisa barrier and just win the duel, right? If they do have dive tanks, you want to play a little bit further back where you can turn around and hook shot away. Hanzo acts because you remember the old comp used to be Widow, Junkrat, right? So what Junk was there for was to dissuade dives. He was there to break shields so the Widow gets sightlines and to dissuade dives. Hanzo does the same thing but from longer range and just better. Uh, because he could also help pressure enemy Widows, get long range pickoffs consistently. So he kind of plays that Junkrat positioning sometimes in this double sniper setup. So he's sitting on Earls so that if Winston or Diva try to jump up there, they get melted, to start at least. So yeah, that's the starting setup there. As it evolves, the teams adapt based off of what's being run against them. We'll see the dive tanks here from GGEA versus LNL. So LNL is running full dive. GGE recognizes that, so their tanks are basically playing in a counter dive style now, with Keller playing further back because that's the only thing he's really got to. He needs to stay away from the dives, and he really only has to win that widow duel. So he's playing further back by the rock and pretty much just keeping an eye for track. Fisher's playing around his tanks, but you see back there, that's where Keller hangs out most of this time. Gray also goes and provides pressure to open up space for Keller to get more shots in. That's another rotation that you will see them make if they're trying to win that Widow duel, is dropping over here to try to get a sight line on that. Like, obviously, you got to move around, otherwise you can't be static, otherwise they're just going to jump shot you. Uh, but that's the positioning right now. The dive tanks, Sombra, are set up for counter dive. Hanzo is kind of an anchoring like melter up there on Big Earl's. Widow way in the back where she can't be dived or dove very easily. EMP goes out, which initiates the tanks dive onto the enemy tanks because they can't get away. They don't have mobility skills. And that's pretty much how it goes for the rest of the whole fight. The whole fight basically goes this way. They even dropped the Widowmaker because they knew that they couldn't get enough pressure on Keller for there to be an advantage for Track, because Track's going to walk into the sight line because Keller's holding that sight line right now. Um, but the whole rest of the match basically goes that way, where anytime the dive comes in, the counter dive comes in, and the Hanzo just basically annihilates Winston. So that's one way to do it. And the other way is what Toronto Esports does. So their setup to start is virtually the same. Uh, Keller's in the same spot as what we mentioned, or not Keller. Visility is in the same spot what Keller was before. Basically, the whole setup's the exact same, except it's a Orisa over a Winston and a Zen over the Somber. So the Zen's up by the Orisa Barret, obviously. So they scout at this point and see it's a slow push Orisa Hog comp, right? Double sniper Orisa Hog. So they know they're going to lose that shield war. So they play the sign of the Earl a lot more. Hanzo's up there behind him. Pretty sure Visility's back there. Can't really tell right now because of the way the thing is. Oh yeah, no. So Visility, because they know they're going to lose the shield war. Visility's playing the big Earl sign, right? Like I mentioned, that to get that advantage for the Widowmaker duel, he's trying to play around his main tank. And they back up to deny the hog spam for getting damage in there and make Minish commit more to be able to hit that Orisa shield. Visility takes a pretty aggressive spot, but the whole concept of why he did that was to set up an offensive side or a defensive sightline, right? So now Leffa has to go into Visility's sightline, who's already set up to be able to take that duel. It also denies, because of the angle, with the Orisa being on the ground, it makes it really hard for Leffa to actually take that space behind the Orisa shield. So now basically both Widows are just playing out in the open, but there's a rock that Visility can retreat to. Shu has been popping off this whole time with this whole roaming Zen technique. I don't know if it's like actually good, but he basically has carried some of the fights just off that. I think Minish is going up there to duel Nero. Yeah, which with Visility already winning the fight, he didn't need to push up this far. Had he actually stayed back there, he'd have been able to hit Minish as he was crawling up the side of Earl. But so looking at this, why do they push up then? Why are they holding this angle instead of back on Big Earl, which seemed to be a strong position? Well, because Big Earl actually really wasn't a strong position in this case because the Roadhog allowed so much shield break that the offense had a better opportunity to set their Widow at better sightlines, right? So what they're doing is they're basically denying those long sightlines the attackers could get if they set up by playing up here. And if their shield breaks, they just rotate back a tiny bit and use this wall to buy time for the shield to come back up and set it back up again on a very short sightline. By setting up right here, they give both their snipers time to do damage to the enemy with Orisa spamming in and all that other crap, Zen spamming in, and they're basically just trying to get picks right here and end fights before they start. And if their shield gets broken and they get put in bad position, they rotate back a little bit and just wait for their shield to come back. And on that shorter sideline, Widows are less dangerous, right? So you see, they reset the shield because they had enough time to. With that pick, they know they're not going to push in. And their shield got broken. They rotated back and then reset the shield as soon as it came back up. Shield got broken. They fall back a little bit, play that corner. Shield comes back up. Now it's a pretty even fight. Ult comes in, separates them, fight one with a dragon strike. Always a good thing. And Shu just being a flank Yata for some reason. But yeah. Uh and that's really the two ways. Now, they wouldn't have done this if this was a dive setup. If they had dive tanks, they would not set up there. They would stay on Earl. The whole point of reason for staying on Earl to start is because you don't want to be caught out of position by one of those fast dives. So you start out up there, and if they don't have the dive, then you could start being a little bit more aggressive with it here. I don't think you could accomplish this if they run the dive because all they got to do is just get the tanks on you and Orisa can't do anything. So it's a counter positioning to the comp that Bioweek's running, and Bioweek does not adjust and just keeps running it straight at them and eventually gets full held. I think they get to about right there. I don't think showing how Toronto or who's the other one? GGEA beats the other team is going to be super helpful just because they don't have to push it that little bit. They do roll, so maybe I'll skip up. We'll see. So they start out with a Bastion. It doesn't work, so they swap to Shimada Bros, right? Shimada Bros dive. And we get so you see because they were running what were they running the Bastion with Orisa before. I actually think their positioning was kind of bad for the attack, like to defend against what the attack was, but they do a good job playing around the sign for Earl. It looks like the advantage is in the attacker's side, but that happens. Leffa catches Facility playing a little too aggressively. Let's see, Leffa back there. Facility was playing off at the side instead of playing behind shield. The pull comes in, yanks Bastion off a cart, and they drop to brawl. And Hog beats Diva in a brawl, typically. But I personally thought this was going to be the turning point right here. It seemed to be going pretty good, but then Leffa gets Facility again, and then Waifu basically just saves everything. So if they had expected them to stay on Bastion comp, I would expect them to stay lower down here to where they can push in and start a brawl right away. When they see them swap to dive, they should rotate back up to that spot they were in, which they do. Now the benefit of the Hanzo dive over the Tracer dive is the poke. Exactly what I was talking about where this position punishes the dive because you can just counter dive or you can they can't get to your Widow, right? So they're trying to come into Earl. You saw the butt jump in and set up right there. But during that time, because the Widow has such strong sight lines, the Genji gets picked. Um, Somebody else got picked too right away, and they basically just have to back out immediately. And then they take their aggressive spot, their aggressive stance. But now when they're seeing the resets, they should fall back and get back on Earls. But they don't. And this is what happens. They lost that fight, and then Minish brings it back by killing like 4 people. So they were in a bad position. Waifu saves them against the Bastion setup. They were in a bad position there, and Minish bails them out. But now because the respawns are coming back so slow, and you have the dive tanks which are faster, they're able to set up quickly, right? Whereas the defense is still trying to get together. Hog stuck on the low ground. Orisa's up there by herself now without her off tank. Actually, yeah, okay, yeah, I remember now. So they catch the Zen. Read mine a little bit too far. So Zen dropped. He's on the ground by himself, right? In the back. I mean, not by himself, but he will be in a second. So Mercy goes up, Widow goes up, Hanzo goes up, Zen's by himself. So I think visibility spots them out, calls them out, and that becomes their dive target, right? Jump them, gone instantly. They trance blade to get the snipers, and they lost that simply because they did not reset against the dive. That is why they lost that one. Unless they were so worried about the blade just 6K'ing them up there that they decided to leave a Hanzo down or a Zenyatta down there and have their team spread out. If they had stayed together with that Widow in the back and the Hanzo up there with the Roadhog, the Orisa, they had done like the full reset like we mentioned. It's feasible that they could have gotten a halt hook combo off on the Genji or a halt into a headshot, or at least made him burn his reflect so it wouldn't have gotten as much value on the blade, right? Instead, they get piecemealed, which is what Dive always wants to do. So if we do run the double sniper and we want to run the Orisa Diva, we got to make sure we set up correctly, depending on what the enemy team's running. Otherwise, they just kind of roll through. Um, if we do the dive setup, I think the dive reset stays pretty much the same the whole time, with the Winston up there, Diva over here, and then the two snipers playing those areas. Uh, but yeah, that's my double sniper analysis of Route 66.